Alright, settle in, because this still gets under my skin even now, years later. You know those moments in life when the ground just shifts beneath your feet? When everything you thought was solid crumbles like dust. That's what happened to me one sweltering July night, the kind of night where the air hangs thick and heavy, promising a storm that never quite breaks. I was at what I thought was going to be a casual get-together, a low-key barbecue at Sarah's place. Sarah. My best friend since we were kids, practically sisters. And Mark. Well, Mark was just Mark. Reliable, easygoing, the kind of guy who always had your back. He and Sarah were the golden couple, the ones you pointed to when people said true love didn't exist. They'd been together since college, a decade of anniversaries, shared dreams, and that comfortable silence that only comes with knowing someone inside and out. Or so I thought. I remember pulling up to Sarah's house, the familiar scent of charcoal and grilling meat already filling the air. Laughter spilled out from the backyard, a mix of familiar voices. It was supposed to be a small gathering, a few close friends celebrating. Honestly, I can't even remember what the occasion was anymore. It's all overshadowed by what happened later. I walked through the gate, a bottle of wine in hand, and was immediately enveloped in the usual warmth. There was Ben, cracking his usual terrible jokes, Maria animatedly telling a story, and of course, Sarah and Mark, side by side near the grill, their easy camaraderie radiating outwards. Everything felt normal, comfortable, predictable. And that's what makes the memory of what followed so jarring, so deeply unsettling. It's like a beautiful painting suddenly slashed with a violent, ugly tear. The evening drifted along in that easy, familiar way. We ate, we drank, we laughed. Mark told a particularly embarrassing story about a camping trip gone wrong, and Sarah playfully swatted his arm. I even found myself reminiscing with them about our ridiculous college days, the bad fashion choices, the all-nighters fueled by cheap coffee and sheer desperation. There was absolutely no hint, no flicker, no shadow of the bomb that was about to detonate in the middle of it all. Maybe that's the cruelest part of betrayal, the utter normalcy that precedes it, the way life just hums along while a secret festers beneath the surface. As the night wore on, the crowd thinned out. Ben and Maria were the first to leave, followed by a few others who had early starts the next day. Eventually, it was just me, Sarah, and Mark left, lingering by the dying embers of the grill. The conversation lulled, punctuated by comfortable silences. Sarah yawned and stretched, saying she was feeling the long week catching up to her. Mark offered to help her clean up inside. "You don't have to go yet, do you?" Sarah asked me, a hint of sleepiness in her voice. I shook my head. I wasn't quite ready to go home to my empty apartment. There was a certain comfort in their presence, a feeling of belonging that I cherished. Sarah and Mark headed inside, Mark's hand resting lightly on the small of her back. I watched them go, a small smile playing on my lips. They were just so them. Perfect in their comfortable, everyday way. I decided to stay outside for a bit longer, enjoying the cool night air. I grabbed another glass of wine and wandered over to the far corner of the yard, near the old oak tree that had been there since Sarah was a child. It was darker there, shielded from the porch light, and I just wanted a moment of quiet contemplation before heading home. That's when I saw it. The faint glow of a phone screen, tucked away in the shadows near the back fence. I frowned, thinking maybe someone had left their phone behind. As I got closer, I could make out hushed voices, too low to discern words but thick with an unmistakable intimacy. My blood ran cold as I realized the voices belonged to Mark, and not to Sarah. The tone was soft, tender, the kind of voice you reserve for someone you're deeply connected to, someone you desire. Curiosity, that insidious beast, got the better of me. I crept closer, my heart pounding in my chest like a trapped bird. The phone screen illuminated a face, not Sarah's. A woman with long dark hair, her eyes closed as she spoke softly into the phone. And then I heard it, the words that sliced through the night and shattered the illusion of everything I thought I knew. "I miss you so much," Mark whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't wait to see you again." The air caught in my throat. It felt like the world had tilted on its axis. This couldn't be happening. Not Mark. Not their Mark. My Mark too, in a way, the steadfast presence in my best friend's life, a silent reassurance that some things were solid and true. I stood there, frozen in the darkness, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I was witnessing. Who was this woman? How long had this been going on? And what about Sarah? Just then, Mark chuckled softly, and the woman on the screen giggled in response. It was a sound of shared intimacy, a secret language that excluded Sarah, that excluded me, that excluded everything I believed about their relationship. My hand instinctively went to my mouth, stifling a gasp. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, the wine in my glass suddenly feeling heavy and toxic. I had to get out of there. I couldn't confront him, not yet. My mind was a whirlwind of disbelief, anger, and a profound sense of betrayal. Betrayal not just of Sarah, but of the years of friendship and trust we had all shared. I backed away slowly, my steps muffled by the soft grass, until I was out of sight. I slipped back towards the front of the house, my movements feeling clumsy and uncoordinated. I mumbled a quick goodbye to Sarah, feigning a sudden headache. She looked at me with concern, her brow furrowed, but I just waved her off, desperate to escape the suffocating reality I had just stumbled upon. I got into my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. As I drove away, the image of Mark's face, illuminated by the soft glow of that other woman's picture, was burned into my mind. The comfortable normalcy of the evening felt like a cruel joke, a carefully constructed facade that had just crumbled to dust, revealing the ugly truth beneath. And as I drove into the storm that had finally decided to break, mirroring the turmoil inside me, I knew one thing for sure. My best friend's life and mine would never be the same again. The secret I had stumbled upon in the shadows that night was a poison that was about to seep into everything. The drive home was a blur. The rain lashed against my windshield, mirroring the chaos in my head. Each drop felt like another shard of disbelief, another painful question without an answer. How could Mark do this to Sarah? How could he betray someone who loved him so completely, so unconditionally? And why, oh why, did I have to be the one to witness it? It felt like a cruel twist of fate, a burden I wasn't sure I could carry. Once I was inside my apartment, the silence amplified the turmoil within me. I paced the floor, replaying the scene in my mind, searching for any sign I might have missed, any hint of the deception that had been lurking beneath the surface. But there had been nothing. Absolutely nothing. That was the terrifying part. The ease with which Mark had seemingly compartmentalized his life, the casual normalcy he had projected just moments before I stumbled upon his secret. Sleep was impossible. My mind raced with possibilities, with scenarios, with the crushing weight of knowing something so devastating about my best friend's life. Should I tell her? When? How? The thought of being the one to deliver such a blow, to shatter her seemingly perfect world, filled me with dread. Yet, the idea of keeping it to myself, of allowing her to remain blissfully unaware of the betrayal, felt equally unbearable. It was like being caught between a rock and a hard place, both options leading to immense pain. I thought about their relationship, the years I had witnessed their apparent happiness. Had it all been a lie? Had there been cracks in their foundation that I had been too blind to see? I remembered countless dinners, weekend trips, holidays spent together. All moments that now felt tainted by the knowledge of Mark's secret life. It was like looking at old photographs and suddenly noticing a shadow lurking in the background, a subtle but sinister presence that had gone unnoticed before. As the first rays of dawn crept through my window, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself for long. The weight of the secret was already suffocating me. Sarah deserved to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. But the how? That was the question that continued to haunt me. I couldn't just blurt it out over coffee. It needed to be handled delicately, with as much compassion as possible, even though Mark's actions deserved none. I spent the next few days in a state of anxious limbo. I avoided Sarah, making flimsy excuses about being busy or not feeling well. Each time my phone buzzed with a text from her, my stomach clenched with guilt and a growing sense of dread. I knew I was delaying the inevitable, but the fear of the fallout, the potential destruction of their relationship and our friendship, paralyzed me. During this agonizing waiting period, I found myself observing couples around me with a newfound skepticism. Were they truly happy? Were there secrets lurking beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect lives? It was as if the veil had been lifted, and I was suddenly hyper-aware of the fragility of relationships, the potential for deception to hide behind even the most loving facades. I even considered confronting Mark myself, demanding an explanation, perhaps even an assurance that he would tell Sarah. But anger and confusion warred within me. What would I say? What right did I have to interfere in their relationship, even though Sarah was my best friend? And what if he denied it? What if he twisted the story, making me look like the crazy, meddling friend? The internal conflict was tearing me apart. I lost sleep, my appetite vanished, and a constant knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. I knew this couldn't go on. I had to make a decision, however difficult. Sarah deserved to know, and I couldn't be the one complicit in keeping this devastating secret from her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I knew I had to act. I called Sarah and suggested we get together for lunch. I kept my tone casual, trying to mask the turmoil raging inside me. She sounded happy to hear from me, her usual cheerful self. That made it even harder. How could she be so oblivious to the bomb that was about to shatter her world? We met at our usual spot, a cozy little cafe we had frequented since college. As I watched her walk towards me, her familiar smile lighting up her face, a wave of sadness washed over me. She looked so happy, so carefree. How was I going to take that away from her? We exchanged pleasantries, ordered our food, the conversation light and easy, just like it always was. But beneath my forced smile, my heart was pounding. I could feel the weight of the secret pressing down on me, threatening to spill out at any moment. I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. Taking a deep breath, I looked at her, my eyes filled with a seriousness that I knew would immediately set her on edge. "Sarah," I began, my voice barely a whisper, "there's something I need to tell you. Something difficult." Her smile faded, her eyes narrowing with concern. She reached across the table and placed her hand on mine, her touch warm and reassuring. "What is it?" she asked softly, her usual light-heartedness replaced by a palpable anxiety. And then, I told her. I recounted the night at her barbecue, the lingering by the grill, the faint glow of the phone screen in the darkness, the hushed voices, and the devastating words I had overheard. As I spoke, her hand tightened around mine, her face losing all color. Her eyes, once filled with warmth and happiness, now reflected a growing horror and disbelief. I watched as the reality of my words slowly began to sink in, the cheerful atmosphere of the cafe fading into a dull, buzzing silence. When I finished, she just stared at me, her eyes wide and unseeing, her hand now ice-cold in mine. The silence stretched, thick and heavy with unspoken questions, with the shattering of a decade's worth of shared history and trust. The storm I had witnessed from afar that night had finally arrived, and it was raging within the four walls of that little cafe, threatening to destroy everything in its path. The secret was finally out, and the aftermath, I knew, would be devastating. The silence that followed my confession felt like an eternity. Sarah's eyes were fixed on me, but I could tell she wasn't really seeing me. It was as if her mind was trying to process the enormity of what I had just told her, struggling to reconcile the Mark she knew with the image I had painted in my words. Finally, she pulled her hand away, a shudder running through her body. You're sure?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, thin and reedy like a broken string. "You're absolutely sure it was Mark?" I nodded, my heart aching for her. "Yes, Sarah." I heard his voice. I saw his face on the phone screen. I hesitated, then added the detail that had felt like a punch to the gut. He said he missed her, and that he couldn't wait to see her again. A single tear escaped her eye and traced a lonely path down her pale cheek. Then another, and another, until a torrent of grief began to spill forth. She didn't sob loudly, didn't scream. Instead, she sat there, her body trembling, tears streaming down her face in silent, heartbreaking sobs. The other patrons in the cafe glanced our way, their conversations hushed, sensing the raw pain radiating from our table. I reached out to touch her arm, but she flinched away, as if my touch itself was a painful reminder of the broken trust. Who is she? She finally choked out, her voice thick with tears. Do I know her? I shook my head. I don't know, Sarah. I only saw her picture on his phone. The realization that I had no further details to offer seemed to amplify her pain. The unknown was perhaps even more terrifying than the known. We sat there for a long time, Sarah lost in her grief, me feeling helpless and heartbroken beside her. I wanted to take away her pain, to rewind time to that oblivious evening before the truth had shattered everything. But all I could do was sit with her in her devastation, offering silent support. Eventually, the sobs subsided, leaving her looking drained and fragile. She wiped her eyes with a shaky hand, her gaze distant. I need to think, she said finally, her voice hollow. I need to understand. I nodded understandingly. Of course. I'm here for you, Sarah. Whatever you need. The lunch we had intended to be a casual catch-up had turned into a life-altering moment. We left the cafe in silence, the unspoken weight of the betrayal hanging heavy between us. When we reached her car, she turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and confusion. Thank you, she said softly, for telling me. I needed to know. Her words, though quiet, were like a knife twisting in my gut. Knowing she was hurting so deeply because of what I had revealed was almost as painful as witnessing Mark's betrayal myself. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, tearful conversations, and shared grief. Sarah was understandably devastated, her world upended by the revelation of Mark's infidelity. The decade they had spent together, the future they had planned, now felt like a lie, a carefully constructed illusion that had crumbled overnight. The first thing Sarah did was confront Mark. I wasn't there for the conversation, but she recounted it to me later, her voice filled with a mixture of anger, hurt, and disbelief. According to Sarah, Mark initially denied everything, dismissing my account as a misunderstanding, a drunken hallucination. But Sarah, armed with the unwavering certainty in my voice and the undeniable shift she now recognized in his recent behavior, refused to back down. Eventually, cornered and exposed, Mark confessed. He didn't offer much in the way of explanation, just mumbled apologies and vague excuses about feeling lost and confused. The details of the affair, the other woman's identity, the duration of the deception, those remained largely unknown, either because Mark refused to divulge them or because Sarah couldn't bear to hear them. The aftermath was messy and painful. Sarah moved out of their apartment, finding refuge on my couch for a while. The comfortable silence that had once characterized her relationship with Mark was replaced by a deafening emptiness. The shared dreams they had nurtured over the years lay shattered, like shards of broken glass. Our friendship, thankfully, remained strong, though tinged with a new layer of sadness. We spent countless hours talking, crying, and trying to make sense of the senseless. I did my best to be a supportive presence, offering a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on, but I knew that ultimately, the healing process was Sarah's alone to navigate. The revelation of Mark's affair sent ripples through our wider circle of friends. Some were shocked and supportive of Sarah, others were hesitant to take sides, and a few even expressed disbelief, unable to reconcile the Mark they knew with the betrayer I had unmasked. It was a stark reminder of how easily appearances could be deceiving, how carefully crafted facades could hide dark secrets. As for Mark, he became a pariah. The easygoing charm that had once made him so likable now seemed like a calculated mask. The betrayal of Sarah had exposed a hidden side of him, a selfishness and capacity for deceit that none of us had ever suspected. Watching Sarah navigate the wreckage of her relationship was heartbreaking. The woman I had known as vibrant and full of life now seemed withdrawn and fragile. The pain of betrayal is a unique kind of agony, one that attacks not just the heart but also the very foundation of trust and self-worth. There were days when she seemed to be making progress, when a flicker of her old self would resurface. And then there would be days when the grief would overwhelm her, and she would retreat back into her shell. It was a slow and arduous process, marked by tears, anger, and the difficult task of piecing together a new identity, one that wasn't defined by her relationship with Mark. Through it all, I remained her steadfast friend, offering unwavering support and reminding her of her strength and resilience. We talked about the future, a future that now looked vastly different from the one she had envisioned. We made new plans, small ones at first, and then gradually, bigger ones, filling the void left by the broken promises. The night I discovered my best friend's secret affair was a turning point for all of us. It exposed the fragility of even the seemingly strongest bonds and the devastating impact of betrayal. It taught us that appearances can be deceiving and that the people we think we know best can sometimes harbor the deepest secrets. It was a painful lesson, one that left scars, but one that ultimately strengthened the bonds of true friendship in the face of adversity. And while the memory of that night still lingers, a shadow in the bright tapestry of our shared history, it also serves as a reminder of the enduring power of resilience and the unwavering support of a true friend.